discussion on Black Feminist Thought by Patricia Hill Collins. We will be discussing today the second chapter. So earlier this week, we discussed the first chapter of Black Feminist Thought, the second part of that chapter. Today, we will be continuing the conversation and going to chapter 2, part 1 of chapter 2. So specifically, we'll be discussing the sections Why Black Feminist Thought, Diverse Responses to Black Feminist Thought, and Black Feminist Practices and Black Feminist Thought. So feel free to ask different questions, to comment today. Before we get started, though, make sure that you go and obtain the syllabus from the website, the Smart Brown Girls website. Also, in the description for today's live, there is a link to that site. So make sure you get the syllabus from there and any other syllabi for upcoming discussions and things like that. Also remember that on the 22nd, we will be having a live with Juicy and Dr. Patricia Hill Collins on Black Feminist Thought. So that's exciting as well. Let's get started. So chapter 2 discusses the distinguishing features of Black Feminist Thought. And I mentioned that on the last live that we would be going into the different components of Black Feminist Thought. And so it explores Black Feminist Thought as not only theory or ideology, but also this thing that is practiced and that is designed to incite action. So it speaks of the necessity for Black women to have something that is for them, not just something that's for them within the academy, but something that is for them outside of the academy as well. It speaks to the fact that Black women who are not academics are also theorists and theorizing about their own experiences. And essentially, that's what Black Feminist Thought is. It's based on our experiences. And so Black Feminist Thought as a practice and an ideology centers the diverse and complex experiences of Black women, while also demonstrating the need to resist and incite change and action. So if you have your syllabus with you, I would like to begin going through the different questions. And again, feel free to respond and feel free to ask other questions. And I'll try to post them on the screen so that you can see those questions that other people are asking. Hey, Diane. And so the first question is, what is meant by the statement that, quote, so much of U.S. Black feminism has been filtered through the prism of the U.S. context, end quote. And so, again, this is from the first part of chapter 2 under the first section. And so I'll start off since I don't see any questions right now. But for me, when Patricia Hill Collins talks about Black feminism, or specifically U.S. Black feminism being filtered through the prism of the U.S. context, she is referencing the complexities that exist within American society, specifically for the Black woman. And so Black feminism is being curated and created and manifested through those experiences had by U.S. Black women. And so that means that specifically there are contradictions between this idea that somehow we are free, while at the same time we are obviously oppressed and fighting to end that oppression. And so it is going back to what we discussed a few days ago, it's not only important to have this theory, it's not enough to have theory for theory's sake, but if we're going to theorize something, it's important to also create change through those theories. And so Black feminist thought encourages sort of this, or creates this call to action for Black women. So we do have a comment. The first comment is, I think that the history of the U.S. as a nation state has fostered discrimination through government policy and practices. This is why U.S. Black feminism is unique. Coming from the Caribbean, we didn't experience redlining as a housing issue or racial segregation as an education issue. We did have housing and education issues, but their origins were different. Yeah, so I will say that, so this is a very great comment. It's right on, actually. One of the things that is important to realize is that race and racism as it manifests within the United States is very unique. Race, according to Patricia Hill Collins and those who theorize through a sociological lens, would say that race is this constructed thing. And so race looks different and racism looks different in different places. And so within the US, those things do look like segregation, redlining, the inability to access transportation, what we talked about the other day, the inability to have healthy foods around, things like that. So there's discrimination embedded within the social institutions within the U.S. And it looks different from what it might look like in a more global context. So, yes. So I'll go to the next question. So the next question in the syllabus asks, how does Black women's collective wisdom work to challenge how does Black women's collective wisdom work to challenge prevailing interpretations of the consciousness of oppressed groups? And so it demonstrates that it demonstrates that there exists more than one form of oppression, which she talks about throughout the first chapter and this one, that there are intersectional forms of oppression. And so although we are Black women experiencing oppression, and it might be oppression based on race, gender, and class, that might look different in the different institutions that we belong to, or the different communities we are living in. So our experiences are different. And so it is important to understand that we need to have community and come together collectively to share that wisdom and knowledge. So there's a question that says, would you be able to explain the origins of the word praxis in terms of Black feminists or Black feminism? So I would say, so I don't know about the origins of the term praxis outside of, like, on a larger scale, but within Black feminism, it is like this relationship between theory and action. And so it is, again, understanding that the things that we are theorizing about need to be acted upon, and the things that we are theorizing about are important because they are sort of like the framework or the blueprint that we can use in order to create change. So based on the collective wisdom and knowledge that we have and that we are theorizing about, we are able to then go, I don't know, to our local government, for example, and attempt to create a new policy. For example, the Crown Act is an example of that. So it's like we know that Black women have these experiences in the workplace and in different organizations related to natural hair, and the inability to wear it in a certain way. And then we know that other Black women perhaps are welcome to wear their hair in the way that they see fit. And so the Crown Act was something that was initiated as a response to this collective knowledge that is problematic, that Black women are being prevented from wearing their hair the way that they would love to wear it, whether that be natural or wearing weaves and wigs and what have you. And so Praxis is just putting, specifically to Black feminism, putting that theory into place. And in my opinion, according to Black feminist thought and Black feminism, Black feminist theory, the two should not be separate anyway. So there's no purpose in creating a theory if we're not going to act upon it. And so that's also why Black feminist theory and thought is considered to be a critical social theory, because we are critiquing society, we are critiquing institutions that oppress Black women, and we are doing those things in order to create change. So I'll go back to that second question. So that second question was, how does Black women's collective wisdom work to challenge prevailing interpretations of the consciousness of oppressed groups? And so I had mentioned that our collective wisdom demonstrates that there exists more than one form of oppression. And I'll add to that, I think it also demonstrates that while there are more than one forms of oppression that we are facing as a particular group, it also demonstrates that because those oppressions are intersectional, it's important to address them differently from different perspectives as well. So the activism that takes place looks different in different spaces. So I'll go to part 2 of chapter 2, part 1. And so part 2 focuses on the tensions that exist between linking experiences and ideas. It speaks to Black women having different experiences, which was just addressed, but and how those experiences often fall into various thematic categories. So someone said Kendall's hood feminism. So one of the reads that we and interviews that, or live interviews that took place last month, Kendall's hood feminism really gave us a great outline of these issues. It did, yes. It spoke about housing issues. It spoke about politics. It spoke about issues of work. It spoke about parenthood or mothering specifically. It spoke about issues with transportation, food, different things. So yes, it says not, so the question also says, or comment, not a day goes by and I don't think about her points on food programs being linked to labor. Yes. Yeah, it's important. And so here's one thing that Patricia Hill Collins states in the 3rd section that we'll be covering today. It is about this idea that Black feminist theory is fluid, is this thing that is constantly changing because the experiences of Black women are constantly changing. One thing that often doesn't change, though, are these themes that keep coming up, which Kendall addresses in Hood Feminism. But what Kendall also does is address them from a more contemporary perspective, I would say, but she grounds them historically as well. And so it's important to recognize that, yeah, like, although Black feminist theory, as Patricia Hill Collins, or Black feminist thought, as Patricia Hill Collins points out, started in a particular area, it is manifesting and changing over time. And so new Black feminist theorists inside and outside of the academy are telling us the issues that exist, like Kendall, and how to really begin to navigate those things. I'm trying to go to the next question. Okay. So another question for, one of the questions for part 2 was, how does group knowledge inform the development of Black feminist thought? So actually, let me go back because there was another question. So the first one was, the syllabus reads, in this section, Collins writes that despite differences of age, sexual orientation, social class, region, and religion, U.S. Black women encounter societal practices that restrict us to inferior housing, neighborhoods, schools, jobs, and public treatment. I think this is what we were just talking about with Kendall's hood feminism and the comments that were made. And so the question asks, considering the areas listed, which societal practices have restricted Black women's equal access and opportunities? One of the things that Patricia Hill Collins talks about is these categories that continue to come up that limit how Black women are defined and how Black women are seen through mediated sources, but also just within the society at large. And so those categories, some examples are our intellect, our work habits, and or like diligence within work or work ethic, and then ideas surrounding our sexuality. Oh, it's okay. But yeah, so those are some of the areas that are spoken about. So we may not all have the same experiences, which Patricia Hill Collins speaks of, but we are able to identify certain experiences as oppressive. And so using Kendall's hood feminism as an example, there were some things that like I never personally experienced. So like Kendall talks about living in housing projects, for example. And I've never experienced that, but I did grow up around the corner from a housing project. And so I do know that the services there were not on par to those living in the surrounding areas. I do know that the community thought that that housing project, just like the viewpoint of the larger community of those who lived in there, was like a negative thing. I know that those who were within that area were struggling tremendously. And so it doesn't take me to like live in that actual experience for me to understand that this is a problematic experience. Not that they have access to housing, but the climate within those spaces were problematic. And so, so someone said, I have a question and please feel free to skip over it. But there's a quote that reads, a recognition of this connection between experience and consciousness that shapes the everyday lives of individual African-American women often pervades the work of Black women activists and scholars. What does the consciousness refer to? Is it something outside of the experience? So I'll post this here. And so again, it asks, a recognition of this connection between experience and consciousness that shapes the everyday lives of individual African-American women often pervades the works of Black women activists and scholars. What does this consciousness refer to? Hey, Juicy. So I personally believe that So one of the things that many feminist scholars, not necessarily Black feminist scholars, within their theories have spoken about, particularly starting with second wave feminists, is this idea of consciousness raising. And so, and I know later in the text, Patricia Hill Collins talks about consciousness raising. And so it is this sort of like this thing that happens when we have an experience, and then we are part of this community where we are able to dialogue about these experiences. And so we come to this consciousness, this heightened consciousness that we are not experiencing these things alone, for example. So while I might be experiencing racism within this particular community that I live in right now, or microaggressions within this community, because I'm able to reach out to other Black women, I know that they are also experiencing similar things. And so that knowledge helps me to understand that, one, I'm not alone. And so there's a larger consciousness that happens there. But two, that this is a larger issue. And so is raising my awareness of this fact that it's not just me, it's not just an individual issue. This is a larger issue that is facing and plaguing Black women. And so, and that within that theory, it would say that this consciousness raising would then lead to action. So it's like personal experience. We have dialogue, consciousness raising from that dialogue, and then that consciousness raising requires us to do something about it, if that makes sense. Okay, you're welcome. And so, yeah, I can't, so unless you put your name under, if you're on Facebook commenting, unless you put your name on there, I can't really tell who's asking the questions. But going back to the comment about the Hood Feminism text and Kindle, yeah, so that answering that question, Kindle's book is actually like a response to this question specifically. It tells us all the different ways that that Black women have really, or all of the societal practices that restrict the lives of Black women. So the next question goes to, it speaks about this idea of group knowledge and this collective knowledge or knowledges of Black women, which we spoke about the last time. So it asks, how does group knowledge inform the development of Black feminist thought? And so one of the ways that this happens for me, and from the reading, what I took from it was that the reoccurring pattern, so like acknowledging that so many of us are experiencing different experiences of oppression, microaggression, sexism, homophobia, like different forms of oppressive forces are influencing and shaping our lives. They're reoccurring. We understand that really Black women are experiencing these things. And as I just said, like, it's not just me who's experiencing it. And so because we know that there is a collective experience that is informing what we know about those things and how we respond, how we can respond to those things, it becomes what Collins calls a Black woman's standpoint. And so that is the basis of really Black feminist thought, is this idea that Black women have this standpoint. We have this frame of reference, if you will, for how we experience the world and the world around us and the oppressive forces that we experience in the world, and how we can begin to navigate those things. So I will move on to the third section. So the third section really talks mostly about praxis, which was asked about earlier. And it talks about this relationship between sharing knowledge and how that shared knowledge can stimulate or incite activism and resistance. And so that standpoint that Patricia Hill Collins talks about also includes our various ways of enacting change and responding to oppression. So before I asked the question, there was a comment that said shared individual experiences can become shared group experiences, and then the recognition of the patterns leads to creating a narrative and a language for these unique experiences. Yes. And so it also provides us with the opportunity to sort of tell and retell, and create counter narratives to what other people claim, right? Like the images that other people share about us, when those images are not created by us, right? So we can sort of recreate a narrative. And when we have the ability, when we have a language, and when we have a name for things, it's powerful. When we have the ability to name the oppressive forces, it's problematic, but it's like people begin to believe us in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, it's our way. The individual experiences lead to group experiences, and that's basically this theory. It is a retelling of narratives that really rendered us invisible prior to. So the question for the third section of this chapter was, well, there are several, but the first question was, how does the commitment to theory and analysis deter from activism and Black feminist movements? So I personally don't really feel that if we're looking at Black feminist thought as Patricia Hill Collins talks about it, I don't believe that it is actually deterring from activism. I do believe that activism in this way goes hand in hand. And so it's, for me, it sounds like Black feminist thought and our experiences that are part of Black feminist thought are supposed to lead us to do more and lead us to do, to resist and to create change and to act in order to create that change. So I don't know if anybody else feels differently about that question. And maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but I don't feel like they are sort of two separate things. According to Black feminist thought, they seem to be one, like, I guess, on a spectrum or a continuum, if you will. Theory and analysis then leads to activism within Black feminist, Black feminist thought. And I guess, like, if we're thinking about Black feminist movements at large, so for example, I see like the Black Lives Matter movement as a feminist movement, a Black feminist movement. In fact, it was started by Black women, Black queer women. And so even though they might not say that there is a particular theory that they are using to ground that movement, they do have a stance, they do have a call to action, and they are taking particular, they are using I guess, particular theories that were seen throughout history and that activism throughout history, and they're using it towards that movement. And so I guess I could see how larger movements won't necessarily say like we're using a particular theory as the framework for our movement, but instead they are just really acting or attempting to create change. So, but I think anyone who really delves into different movements that exist, you can see the theory and that lies within it, if you will. And this is why Black feminist thought is so deeply connected to experience. So another question that was posed in the syllabus was, why is maintaining a balance between lived experience and action and theoretical frameworks important and crucial to the continued development of Black feminism? So I'll ask it again, but we have a comment. And so that comment is, agreed, Black feminism should be about learning about oppressions and taking actions to change them. However, I think the question is implying that people who get too steeped in theory may not action, maybe. Oh, okay. So I think it's saying that those who are more theoretical. So I take that to mean then those who are sort of, so I'm thinking about like my own experience within academia, and those who are like doing the theory and they're writing on theory all day and they're teaching the classes on theory, sometimes are disconnected from the activist part or the praxis part. And so the true reasoning and origins of, if we're talking about Black feminism, then gets lost because it's sort of not leaving the classroom, if you will. And so I don't know, like maybe I'm naive, but I do feel like a lot of the theorists that I know who suggest that they are Black feminist theorists are actually doing the work as well. And often they see themselves, like when they are writing and releasing texts and journal articles, not only is it fulfilling like a requirement as part of their job, if you will, but they are also, they believe that they are actually participating in a form of activism as well. So I think it's important for us to really think about how we're defining activism and action. Like, is action, I'm protesting on the street? Is action like what we were discussing in the last live? Is it, I don't know, is it creating art? Is it music? Like activism for me is different and it looks different. And so, but I do know, like, I'm not naive enough to understand that there are people who are sort of like so deeply embedded within the theory that they do nothing. And so it's complex, but I do know also that action looks different for different people. And so, yeah, I do think that was the implication of that question. So thank you, Alana, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, for clarifying. So to go back to the third question, well, the second question in the third section, why is maintaining a balance between lived experience and action and theoretical frameworks important and crucial to the continued development of Black feminism? And so for me, Black feminism is going back to what we were just talking about. Black feminism is about the elimination of oppression. And this oppression cannot be done or undone without understanding the collective experiences of Black women, and then setting out to take action against those different forms of oppression. And so, again, I feel that they are extremely connected. They're deeply connected. And one of, that is one of the major tenets of Black feminism. And as we go on throughout chapter 2, it is also the reason why Black feminism, or Patricia Hill Collins specifically, emphasizes the importance of understanding the ethics of care and the ethics of personal responsibility. And that is because, like, the things that we are saying, our experiences, need to be changed. Like, those experiences are based in oppression. And so that oppression, then because we have this information and because we have this knowledge, now it's our responsibility to change those things. And so resistance is part of that. And so it's important to sort of balance, to go from this sharing of experiences to consciousness raising, and then to action, and then to come back and assess, and to make sure that we are welcoming the experiences of those really from an intergenerational perspective, and those who we might not necessarily see as feminists either. And so it's important to have that balance. So that was actually, oh wait, let's see, another message. So here's a comment. The balance is important, especially since Collins puts the two in conversation. So it can be that too much theory can cause one to become detached from the changing frontline activity, and too much learning towards activism can mean you are not keeping up with the changing thoughts. Both can become stagnant without the push and pull. Yes, definitely. And that goes back to the last thing that we were talking about before this question as well. So like the balance is important, because you don't want to just get so stuck in like this phase where I'm building this new theory, and then all of a sudden, like the theory is no longer relevant because you have no clue what's going on in the street, right? Or on the block or in the community. And so the two need to be in conversation with each other. So yes. There's another question. An off the wall question: could a white male study Black feminism as a primary area of study and be taken seriously? So it actually talks a little bit about that in the text. It says that Patricia Hill Collins suggests that she's not saying that someone other than Black women cannot study the experiences, cannot, like, it can't be someone else other than Black women. So I will say positionality is a major thing in Black feminism and Black feminist thought, and really feminism overall. But I do believe that a lot of feminists outside who are not Black, Black women specifically, often fail to discuss their positionality. And when I say positionality, I'm talking about this idea that, like, your standpoint, like, why are you studying Black feminism if you're a white dude? So explaining that to people. So I do believe that, white men can study Black feminism. I do believe that they can, since there are frameworks and tenets that are shared, that are part of the theory, that make up the theory. I do believe that that person can study those tenets and put them in practice. I don't believe that a white dude can understand the experiences of Black women from the standpoint of a Black woman, though. So, and I think this is a continuation. So it says, just to push thought a bit further, is there a risk of saying only Black women can study this, lead to the creation of a monolithic experience of Black womanhood, or is there a fallacy in my thoughts? So I don't know. So I identify personally as a Black feminist. I don't believe that other people, like a white dude, can identify as a Black feminist. I do believe that perhaps they can use the tenets of Black feminism as a theory, or as a study of knowledge to examine something that is going on within society. I would not, I would say that a white guy could say that they are a feminist, not a Black feminist, though. And that is just my view. And perhaps other people would say that, yeah, no, they can't study Black feminism. Now, I would question, why you? There are tons of Black women trying to study Black feminism. So why take away from their opportunity? Is it taking away from their opportunity? And as far as the monolithic experience, so I think this is one of the reasons why Patricia Hill Collins stresses the importance of making sure that we are including Black women from different perspectives. I don't think it's done to the best of its ability. I don't think we do a good job of making sure that those who would never say that they are Black feminists actually are part of these conversations. But I do believe that they're one of the key tenets from her viewpoint is to include those from all perspectives, from all lived experiences, to prevent that monolithic or essentialist experience or viewpoint. But I do believe that there is fear that that could happen if only certain folks are welcome, if you will. So someone said, I saw a tweet today about a white guy in NC who was teaching the music of Rhapsody, I believe, from a feminist political perspective. And I'm going to say, I know tons of, so there are a group of feminists at Oakland University who are studying hip hop feminism. And they are, there's a white guy and there are two white women, and they are studying it, hip hop feminism, which is, I believe if we look at the history of it, is really a feminist theory that is based in the experiences of Black women in hip hop culture. And so they are using a Black feminist perspective to, one type of Black feminist perspective to study hip hop. And so it's done all the time. But I do believe that we also have a responsibility to ask them why. And to make sure that they are accountable, they are being held accountable for the things that they are saying. But I don't know. I do believe, I don't feel like Black feminism is being taught enough in the first place. And so right now, at the point where I am, I wish I could be in a space to teach it everywhere, right? At least in the institution I'm in, I teach it once a year, if that, once every 2 years. And it's rarely brought up by other people. And so if it is being taught by someone, I think that's still important. But we do, they need to still be held accountable for the things that they're teaching and how they're teaching it, and for their positionality as well. Somebody said, I was just about to write that, when departments do calls for a Black feminist scholar, do they do they take opportunities from Black women feminists? So I don't know, like for my institution, I'm the only one who teaches that course. And in fact, I think I was hired specifically because I could teach that course. And the course is Black Feminist Theory. But unfortunately, not only, like, there are not a lot of Black women feminists at institutions who are able to offer courses like that, and who are even given like when they had that course created, or even given the opportunity to teach it, because things like budget cuts are always used as like reasoning to eliminate a course with such a specialized theory or I guess grounding or framework. And so someone said, thank you for addressing that question, because I'm Black and immigrant. I sometimes wonder where I belong. I believe I belong, but I also respect and understand when folks let me know there are certain experiences I don't have access to that you as Black women do. Yeah, so, yeah, and I mean, like, even as a Black woman, so I appreciate this comment, because even as a Black woman, like, I have different experiences, and sometimes, like, I don't step up to say anything because I don't feel like it is my place to say something in a particular situation. But I don't know, like, I feel like the opportunity to teach about the experiences of Black women is so rare that, like, at this moment in time, we just either need to hire more Black women to teach these courses, or actually, like, I don't know, create space within other courses. And both of those things I don't think are being done at the moment in the way that they should be. But yeah, so the next, yeah. So the next comment is that, agreed, I wish the tenets of Black feminism were widely taught. And so like for me, even though, like I said, like the course that I teach is usually only once, like in the spring, so once a year or once every 2 years, it has actually been cut down because of the budget. But I try to make opportunities, because I'll just put this out here. I also direct a women's center, and I teach. So it's like I have a dual position. But and so I have these cohorts for Black women and women of color, and so I try to actually shape or like structure the cohort using the tenets of Black feminism. So I try to teach people about Black feminist thought and those tenets, even if it's not in a formal course. So, and so I think it's important to sort of share the information, even when it's not like welcome or expected. Someone said true Black feminism is often taught as a section in a feminist theory class. And I'm gonna be like, when I took feminist theory, it was not a section at all. It was a supplementary reading, and it was just Audre Lorde, and it was one reading by her. And so, honestly, like, I chose to focus on Black feminism because like I did it really as a form of resistance, because they weren't letting me, like, we weren't focusing on it. And I remember asking, like, so how come these are like the women on the margins are being further marginalized by you placing them on the periphery of the syllabi? Like, they're not even like a major reading. And I sort of got ignored, I think, but I still chose to study them. Like, that was my project and everything. But So Diane said, book clubs and sister circles are also spaces for conversations about Black feminism. Yeah. So just like this, like, to me, this is rare, and this is why I appreciate this opportunity because, like, so just a note, like Diane is my friend. That's the only person I talk about Black feminism with. And so other than this opportunity, and so, and when I'm teaching a class, but that's like informing them about it. It's rare that I'm able to discuss Black feminism with those who like actually know something about it already. And we're able to sort of like just add to each other's conversation and it be organic and things like that. So book clubs and sister circles are like great spaces. So someone said, I totally understand this point of view. I went to school in the US and moved back almost 5 years ago. And I always feel like my place is outside of US Black feminists. I really appreciated the last 2 paragraphs of the diverse responses section discussing the connections of US Black feminism and a global context of Black women, for a lack of better words. Yeah. So I do like, my thing is like, it's important for us to understand that, and while the US Black experience, originally through the origins of Black feminism were based on the US Black experience, that US Black experience is dynamic and complex because even like someone who moved back and you're living in the US, that's still a US Black experience. And that is still a Black feminist experience. And so those experiences are also something that we should talk about and hear about and should be part of that Black feminist thought or knowledge construction, because that shapes what we know as well. And it's part of that evolving component of Black feminism. And so thanks for that comment. Someone said, why am I acting shocked? But so, yeah, like, I don't know, like going back to the spaces for conversations about Black feminism, I don't know, to me, it's not only empowering, but one of the things that I focus on specifically, and I think the rest of chapter 2, when that live comes up, or we have that live, it discusses like the ethics of care. And I feel like Black feminism, like the ability to have these conversations is healing sometimes. It can be. And so it can really be the reason like why we are able to care for ourselves and really find joy in some way, shape, or form, because we know that other people are experiencing these things. So like, no, we're not crazy. And so those experiences are a collective experience. And so it's important to do some things about those oppressive experiences. And I will say that I also believe that even though Black feminism is focusing on oppression, a key component of it, it's also important to acknowledge that as Black women, we have common experiences that we should celebrate as well. And I think we don't really talk about that either. A lot of times theories, because they come from, critical social theories come from a space of challenge, and they are created as a means of creating change. We don't talk about the ways in which we have positive, similar experiences as well. So that's something to think about as well. So someone said, man, I wish the nitty gritty of Black feminist tenets were more widely discussed, because a lot of spaces tailored for Black women do not follow the tenets of Black feminism ideals and can sometimes be dangerous. That's just my little shady 2 cents, Alana. I do believe it's funny because I was talking about this today with a colleague, not about Black feminism, but about just like being a Black woman in a predominantly white space, and being seen as like dangerous, your ideas being dangerous because you're demanding change. And so Patricia Hill Collins even talks about the reality that like when collective experiences are shared, it is seen at like it is people do attempt to those in power attempt to mute and silence those experiences, because it's like when you find out other people are having these experiences, and when you like come together collectively, the more collective you are, and the more that something is based in community, then the more willing you are to create change and demand change. And that's dangerous for those in power. It's dangerous because you're threatening their privilege and threatening to take that privilege away. And so the tenets of Black feminism and those ideals are seen as dangerous, in my opinion. So somebody said you are not being shady, you are telling the truth. That is the truth. It is. Oh, and somebody said not this space though. This space is rare. Yeah, I do believe this space, it is rare. Like it's the opportunity to come together and talk to people about all of these different texts that we have, not just Black feminism, and the text be centered on Black women's experiences and our histories and our narratives, and whether they be fiction or nonfiction. That is rare. Like we don't have that opportunity, and we don't have lives about it where people are like checking in a YouTube channel. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it is rare. It's rare to have these conversations. And to be affirmed in these conversations. It's rare, but it's important. And so I actually, if there are no more comments or questions, I'm going to end it. We have 2 minutes, but oh yeah. So someone said, so that's such a great point about the community. About the community gathering, threatening the privilege and the power structure. I didn't think about that. But yeah, so, I mean, this is something that I think this is why we rarely see these opportunities take place. And it's because, I mean, like if we're being honest, Black folks, and not to like damper the mood of excitement about Black feminist theory or the tenets, but like Black folks are already seen as a threat. So like imagine if we're coming together and really gathering and thinking about these things and talking about our collective experiences, and then creating a plan to create change. So yeah. Yeah, and so Diane said we have to create our own spaces, and this is one of those spaces. So I don't know if Julesy is still on the line, but I will say, or on the live, but I will say thank you again for creating this space. It's important and it's empowering and affirming. So I want to thank you all for participating in the chat today. Stay tuned for conversation with Patricia Hill Collins. Stay tuned for the second half of chapter 2. I'm not sure exactly when that's coming up, but it is. So thank you for participating. My Black girl coworker used to joke about hiding our handout so they don't think we are starting a revolution. Yeah, so I think that's like a common thing. Like people already, like when we're together, they think we're conspiring, and perhaps we are. So, but again, thank you, and I will see you whenever I have. Oh, so the next one is next week, Wednesday. So stay tuned for that live about this chapter, part 2 of chapter 2. See you later.